Have you ever heard of Igor Invader? Many players consider him the hardest storyteller in RimWorld. He doesn't care if your colony is recovering. He doesn't care if you're ready. He'll send raid after raid, giving you almost no time to breathe, no time to rebuild. On screen, you can see all the changes Igor makes to the game, but here's the short version. Raids arrive every 2 to 3 days. If one of your colonists dies, reinforcements immediately join the enemy raid. And that's not all. All weapon damage is doubled. Both ranged and melee weapons deal twice as much damage, which means every single fight is deadly. And now, enough talking. This was my experience surviving Igor Invader. The first few days are just like any other storyteller. There aren't many events, there aren't many dangers. I think it's meant to be a preparation phase, a chance to build your initial base and get ready for the constant raids. And trust me, there are a lot of them. It's very common to have injured colonists and still have no choice but to send them back into the next fight. I got pretty lucky with my starting location. I found a small cave inside a mountain. It was the perfect place to build a defensive base. There was only a single entrance, and right outside there was plenty of fertile soil. I wouldn't have to travel far to grow food. Even though I chose a colder biome, I never had any real trouble with weather events. At first I was feeling confident. I immediately started setting up my power grid. It would probably keep the colony running until the mid-game, but there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. I had focused almost entirely on combat and medical skills. I didn't have a single dedicated researcher, and I was afraid that would become the biggest weakness of this run. If I couldn't keep up with research, I knew I'd eventually fall behind. On day 3, I faced my first raid, a lone tribal, nothing too intimidating. But I completely underestimated the double damage, and I made a huge mistake. One single hit was enough to tear my colonist's leg clean off. That was the moment I stopped treating this like a normal RimWorld run. I finally realized just how dangerous Igor really was. After that, I started taking the challenge much more seriously. I built a wooden wall around my base to funnel every raid through a single entrance. It wasn't the strongest defense, but for the early game, it worked surprisingly well. A few days later, I got incredibly lucky. A trader caravan happened to be passing by when a raider attacked. They dealt with the threat before it ever reached my colony. But for some reason, one of the muffalos died. And when it did, it dropped a huge amount of silver. At the time, I thought it was a blessing. I couldn't have been more wrong. That silver massively increased my colony wealth, and in RimWorld, colony wealth is one of the biggest factors that determines the size of enemy raids. I had no idea it then, but I had just made Igor's job a whole lot easier. Here's a quick overview of how colony wealth works. If you're interested in the details, just pause the video. At this point, the colony was in great shape. I had basic defenses, my colonists were happy with almost no risk of mental breaks, and I had more than enough supplies to keep everyone fed. Despite the constant raids, I wasn't taking much damage, but during a party something unexpected happened. Two of my colonists got into a social fight. One punch hit so hard, it looked like he'd been blasted by a shotgun. That was another reminder of just how brutal the double damage really is. The next raid proved it again. One of my colonists fired a single shot from her rifle. It instantly shattered the raider's spine. One bullet, one kill. Eventually the raids started getting much bigger. Most of them had 4 to 6 raiders, and they often attacked in separate groups, making the defenses much harder to manage. I tried recruiting several prisoners, but with only 4 colonists there was always too much work to do. Some prisoners died from starvation, others never recovered from their infections. Then the game reminded me of something I had been ignoring. My entire perimeter was still made of wood. Anything that caused fire or explosions could turn the whole base into a disaster. It didn't take Igor long to figure that out. Before long, he started sending impids, humans capable of breathing fire. And suddenly, my biggest defense became my biggest weakness. After day 20, the raids never stopped. I was starting to feel overwhelmed. My colonists barely had time to repair the defenses. They barely had time to treat their own injuries. By day 25, I genuinely thought the colony was over. It was a massive raid, and it included more than one impid. That was when I really started paying the price for not having a dedicated researcher. I couldn't put it off any longer. I replaced my wooden walls with stone using the blocks I had managed to stockpile. By day 30, the enemy finally broke through my perimeter. At that moment, I knew I had fallen too far behind, so I became desperate. I needed to find a researcher before it was too late. Day 33 finally gave me a bit of good luck. A group of travelers happened to pass by my colony. As they were leaving, they ran straight into a group of raiders. It meant I only had to defend one side of the base. On day 34, I finally finished researching smelting. That gave me access to better weapons, and more importantly, a proper helmet. Later that same day, a mech cluster landed. I'm not going to lie, it's one of the most dangerous events in RimWorld. You have to send your colonists across the map to deal with it, and with raids happening every few days, that was the last thing I wanted, but I didn't have a choice. I also accepted a quest to build a monument. In return, I'd receive a new colonist. At that point, it felt like a trade worth making. When I reached the mech cluster, I realized I had gotten lucky. All I had to do was break through a wall and destroy the structure. I didn't have to fight a single mechanoid. Back at the colony, I started expanding the base. With more colonists and more supplies, we were quickly running out of space. On day 39, I finally finished researching plate armor. I thought that would completely change the run. It was the perfect answer to the double damage. But then I realized something. None of my colonists had the crafting skill needed to make it, so all that research would have to wait. On day 41, the biggest raid so far arrived. 9 raiders. By some miracle, Igor didn't send a single impet, without fire setting everything ablaze. It was just a matter of taking them down one by one. Day 44 brought another major raid. They were still tribals, but this time they came with much better equipment. By then, my defenses were finally coming together. I had one heavily equipped melee fighter holding the front line, with 3 shooters covering him from behind. It wasn't an easy formation to break. On day 45, my biggest weakness showed up once again: fire. My colonists suffered multiple burns, but somehow we managed to hold the line. Day 47 brought a change of pace, my first infestation. The entire base filled with insects. I knew I could deal with them, but I was worried they'd destroy half my colony before I could stop them. In the end, the only real casualty was my dog. I barely had time to recover. Later that same day, another massive raid arrived. Luckily, a trader caravan was standing right outside my base. They fought the raiders for me, but they paid a heavy price. On day 49, I finally unlocked machining. That meant I could start crafting weapons designed to deal with larger groups, which had become my biggest problem. I immediately set up a proper workshop, so my colonists could finally start producing better equipment. Day 50 brought another split raid. Like the others, I managed to deal with it without taking too much damage, but something new happened. Thanks to one of my mods, one of the raiders escaped, and he swore revenge for his fallen comrades. Great, just what I needed. More raids to worry about. I could only hope that wouldn't come back to haunt me. On day 52, while expanding the hallways, gunsmithing finally finished. It unlocked one of the strongest weapons I could ask for, the flamethrower. I didn't waste a second. I immediately assigned one of my colonists to craft it. While the flamethrower was still being crafted, my worst fear became reality. A drop pod raid landed right inside my base. I knew immediately how bad this was. Drop pod raids are some of the most dangerous encounters in RimWorld. I tried to regroup my colonists and hold the doorway, force the raiders through a narrow choke point, but one of them was carrying grenades. There was nothing I could do. The explosion instantly downed 2 of my colonists. One of them died on the spot, and just like that, my entire defense collapsed. As if things weren't already bad enough, the moment my colonists died, Igor's rule took effect. Enemy reinforcements arrived immediately. Then the raider who had sworn revenge came back, with even more reinforcements. At one point, the different raid groups even started fighting each other, but it didn't matter anymore. They set my base on fire. My defenses were gone. There was nowhere left to retreat, and one by one, every single one of my colonists died. And that was my experience surviving Igor Invader. So what did I think? I actually had a lot of fun, but I never really got used to the double damage. Even small social fights between my own colonists could turn into a disaster. Still, I think that's exactly what makes this storyteller unique. He forces you to think about defense before anything else. Every decision has to make your colony stronger. Every mistake can end your run. So if you're the kind of player who enjoys constant pressure and non-stop combat, I think Igor Invader might become your favorite storyteller. But if you prefer slower colonies, character-driven stories, and unexpected twists instead of endless battles, then this probably isn't the storyteller for you. So what do you think? Would you survive Igor Invader?